Hello everyone, welcome to History Class 11 and we'll begin with theme 2, that is writing and city life. The topics that we'll study today are Introduction to City Life in Mesopotamia and Mesopotamia and its Geography. The expectations from today's video lesson are after this video lesson, you would be able to tell about Mesopotamia. You would be able to list the name of the rivers of Mesopotamia and identify and locate Mesopotamia on an outline map of West Asia. At first, let's talk about the etymology of Mesopotamia. The origin of the word Mesopotamia. The name Mesopotamia is derived from the Greek words mesos, meaning middle, and potamus, meaning river. So, it's a land between two rivers. Let's have an introduction to city life. City life began in Mesopotamia, the land between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers that is now part of the Republic of Iraq. So today's Republic of Iraq is Mesopotamia, which lies between Euphrates and the Tigris River. Mesopotamian civilization is known for its prosperity, city life, its voluminous and rich literature, and its mathematics and astronomy. So there was a great culture and civilization that developed in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia's writing system and literature spread to the eastern Mediterranean, northern Syria, and Turkey after 2000 BCE, so that the kingdoms of that entire region were writing to one another and to the Pharaoh of Egypt, the kings of Egypt, in the language and script of Mesopotamia. So we can see here that a full-fledged writing system and literature developed in the eastern Mediterranean, northern Syria and Turkey after 2000 BCE. And they used to write, they used to communicate with Egypt, with the Pharaoh of Egypt, the king of Egypt. Here in this, we shall explore the connection between city life and writing. We understand the city life and how writing developed, and then look at some outcomes of a sustained tradition of writing. So how writing sustained there. In the beginning of recorded history, the land, mainly the urbanized south, was called Sumer and Akkad. So two part, Sumer and Akkad. After 2000 BCE, then Babylon became an important city. The term Babylonia was used for the southern region. So we got here three regions in fact, and on the basis of which Mesopotamian civilization is divided: Sumer, Akkad, and Babylonia or Babylon. From about 1100 BCE, when the Assyrians established their kingdom in the north, the region became known as Assyria. So another one, Assyria. The first known language of the land was Sumerian. So understand it here. The first known language of the land was Sumerian. Now let's talk about the city life. It was gradually replaced by Akkadian around 2400 BCE, when Akkadian speakers arrived This language flourished till about Alexander's time, that is 336 to 323 BCE, with some regional changes occurring. From 1400 BCE, Aramaic also trickled in, another language. This language, similar to Hebrew, became widely spoken after 1000 BCE. It is still spoken in parts of Iraq. So we have got the languages here from the Aramaic and Akkadian. Archaeology in Mesopotamia began in the 1840s at one or two sites, including Uruk and Mari, important sites of Mesopotamia, Uruk and Mari, which we will discuss. Excavations continued for decades. For decades, archaeologists excavated through the excavation process, tried to get more and more information about the civilization. No Indian site has ever seen such long-term projects. Not only can we study hundreds of Mesopotamian buildings, statues, ornaments, graves, tools, and seals as sources, there are thousands of written documents. Several documents we have. Mesopotamia was important to European because of references to it in the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. So it's very important. Mesopotamian civilization has its reference in the Holy Book, the Bible, the first part, which is popularly said as Old Testament. We find references in the Bible. For instance, the book of Genesis of the Old Testament refers to Shimmer, meaning Sumer, as a land of brick-built cities. So, in the Old Testament, the part that is the book of Genesis, the reference is of Shimmer, which was Sumer, as a land of brick-built cities, which was built and brick was used. Travelers and scholars of Europe looked on Mesopotamia as a kind of ancestral land, and when archaeological work began in the area, there was an attempt to prove the literal truth of the Old Testament. So, with the excavations in Mesopotamia, literal truth of the Old Testament was justified. As we have references from the Bible, let's see here. According to the Bible, the flood was meant to destroy all life on earth. However, God chose a man, Noah, to ensure that life could continue after the flood. Noah built a huge boat, an ark. He took a pair each of all known species of animals and birds on board the ark, which survived the flood. There was a strikingly similar story in the Mesopotamian tradition, where the principal character was called Jeusudra or Utna Pishtim. So you might have studied the story that flood came finally to destroy the world. However, God sent a person or chose the person, Noah, to preserve one species of all the animals so that life continues. And similar story we find in Mesopotamian tradition, where the principal character was called Jeusudra or Utna Pishtim. Now let's explore Mesopotamia, find out Mesopotamia. From the mid 19th century, there was no stopping the enthusiasm for exploring the ancient past of Mesopotamia. So by mid 19th century, we started the whole world. We started getting information. We started finding information about the ancient past of Mesopotamia. In 1873, a British newspaper funded an expedition of the British Museum, visit a long journey of the British Museum to search for a tablet narrating the story of the flood mentioned in the Bible. So a search started to find out the tablet on which the story has been mentioned. By the 1960s, it was understood that the stories of the Old Testament were not literally true, but may have been ways of expressing memories about important changes in history. So it was considered, okay, that the stories may not be true, but it was the way to express the memories of important changes in history. Gradually, archaeological techniques became far more sophisticated and refined. What is more, attention was directed to different questions, including reconstructing the lives of ordinary people. So now more attention about the different questions, how was the life of the ordinary people, all came in the picture. Establishing the literal truth of biblical narratives, the written narratives, receded into the background. Now it's very important to understand about the geography of Mesopotamia. Iraq is a land of diverse environments. In the northeast lie green undulating plains, gradually rising to tree-covered mountain ranges with clear streams and wildflowers with enough rainfall to grow crops. So we see here, so the diverse geographical terrains we see here. In the northeast, green undulating plains and tree-covered mountains, streams, wildflowers, and enough rainfall to grow crops. Here, agriculture began between 7000 and 6000 BCE. In the north, there is a stretch of upland called a steppe, where animal herding offers people a better livelihood than agriculture. After the winter rains, sheep and goats feed on the grasses and low shrubs that grow here. To the east, tributaries of the Tigris provide routes of communication into the mountains of Iran. So you can see here, agriculture we consider the beginning between 7000 and 6000 BCE, and people were quite dependent on animal herding, and they did that because that was more profitable than agriculture. So a pastoral culture was there, and specifically because of the stretch of upland called a steppe, where they get grass, fodder for the sheep and goats, and eventually to the east, tributaries of Tigris provide route of communication into the mountains of Iran. Now, completely different terrain, completely different geographical condition. The south is a desert, and this is where the first cities and writing emerged. So in this desert, which we have today, the first cities and writing emerged. This desert could not support cities because the rivers Euphrates and Tigris, as we have already discussed, that the land between two rivers and the rivers were Euphrates and Tigris, which rise in the northern mountains, carry loads of silt, fine mud. When they flood or when their water is let out onto the fields, fertile silt is deposited. Now, more about its geography after that. After the Euphrates has entered the desert, its water flows out into small channels. These channels flood their banks and in the past functioned as irrigation canals. Water could be let into the fields of wheat, barley, peas, or lentils when necessary. So these channels helped in the agriculture, irrigated the land. Of all ancient systems, that of the Roman Empire included, it was the agriculture of southern Mesopotamia that was the most productive that we are talking about, which was desert. Even though the region did not have sufficient rainfall to grow crops, not only agriculture, Mesopotamian sheep and goats that grazed on the steppe, the northeastern plains, and the mountain slopes, that is, on tracts too high for the rivers to flood and fertilize, produced meat, milk, and wool in abundance. So you can see here the production of meat, milk, and wool by animal rearing was quite flourished. Further, fish was available in rivers, and date palms gave fruit in summer. Let us not have, let us not, however, make the mistake of thinking that cities grew simply because of rural prosperity. It was a city life. Now look at the map of West Asia showing Mesopotamia. You can see here this is Tigris River, right? And all the civilization here, Babylon, Uruk, Ur, and here you can see Syria. That is the location. This location is of Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq. Okay. Now you can see the map here that shows mountains, steppe, desert, irrigated zone of the south. You can see that this is the irrigated zone where agricultural productivity used to happen. And the region shows Uruk, Ur, and you have mountain ranges, right? You can see here. So, and the southern limit of some of rain-fed agriculture, right? So as we are done with the city life, beginning introduction and geography of Iraq, Mesopotamian civilization, we have the assignment to locate different rivers, I mean both the rivers and as well as the sea and the location. You have all the questions, mark it on a map of West Asia or map of world, map of the world, and write a short note on the geographical location of Mesopotamia. Thank you and have a wonderful day ahead.